Hey, first and foremost, good morning to wherever you are, good afternoon to wherever you are, good evening to wherever you are on this side of whether it's from the United States, whether you're international, doesn't matter. We certainly want to welcome you all. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Dr. Simeon Sanders. I am a Tutor Doctor franchisee, have been one for the last 3 years. And I certainly don't want to take much of your time, but I certainly want to thank you guys for taking time out of your schedule, taking an opportunity to hear about something different. One of the things that I always think about since I've been a franchisee, we've always pontificated the idea of what makes us different. What's our unique selling proposition? How are we different from our competitors, other than kind of doing the same old, which is kind of trying to fine tune or identify a match, with between tutor and between client. And second thing, actually trying to really tap into who our students are and making sure that we're really providing the right support. Thirdly, thinking about things of how we actually support things from an executive function standpoint. I certainly don't leverage, my name, if you will, the doctor. I actually did my research. And from a neurological standpoint of actually looking at attention level data and what that means in online and immersive learning environments. So I actually set out on my own to kind of identify a different way in which to approach kind of cognitive learning. And lo and behold, I partnered with an individual, with the organization. I actually call him a good friend, Neil Seltzer, who's joining us now. The organization is MindPrint. Just a few weeks ago, I actually brought this to the board and we shared it with the board, and certainly our board chair and board president, James Dolan, said, "Hey, Simeon, we got to get this in front of franchisees just to let them know what it is that we have to offer, et cetera, et cetera." So what we have planned for you guys today is a brief PowerPoint, one where you can see exactly what is MindPrint, and then second, what are the benefits to you as a business owner, and three, how do you actually take this and kind of run with it? And we'll kind of show you maybe a glimpse from a website standpoint. The one thing that I would ask, I don't have my book in front of me, is I ask you to kind of take off your hat, if you will, from a tutor doctor perspective. Don't think about this as how is this like, X skills or, et cetera, because what you're going to see is that this is a whole lot more. So really, really put yourselves in a position of, one, being a parent or being the educator, if you will. You have one of your clients. How do we best meet their needs beyond just matching a tutor? That being said, I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, to my friend, Neil Seltzer. Take it away, brother.
Thank you, Simeon. This is great. And thank you all for taking the time. I am delighted to be here. I want to call out Mark's profile picture. That's making me kind of happy. And I'm loving the brand spirit on Justin's profile picture there. And just by way of background, I've been in the tutoring business since I think I saw my first SAT kid in 1992 in Hong Kong. For many years, I ran a company called Test Services, Inc. that owned 10 Princeton Review franchises around the country back when it was a franchise operation. So I got my start in an environment very much like this one, and on calls very much like this one, when we were all using the amazing collective brain trust to figure out how do we propel this, drive this brand forward, serve more students to the benefit of not just the students in our communities, but all of the collective brand owners as a whole. A couple of years ago, I was the CEO of a company called Int'l Pros that I was helping to build out of New York City. And I came across MindPrint, and it was clear to me that this was where tutoring is going, that this is the future of tutoring. And so I jumped and took over and started building tutor-facing products for MindPrint. So I'm gonna start with a deck. I'm gonna move pretty quickly. Jump in at any point in questions. I'm absolutely going to save time at the end for questions, and I'm going to try to jump into the site itself at the tail end so you can see what it actually looks like from an operational standpoint.
And hey, guys, while Neil is switching over, if you don't mind, one, just so that he can certainly move, feel free to type your questions into the chat. And that way we could kind of run through those when we actually get there. And that allows him to save as much time as possible. Fair enough? Let's roll.
Okay. And let me, all right, there we go. Okay. So before I jump into the product itself, I actually want to start with the customer, because at the end of the day, this is our audience. These are who we're talking to. And this is where all of our relationships start, right? Usually with a phone call with a parent who has something for their student that they need help with. And when that call occurs, we all have, a relatively short period of time in which to convince that parent that we're professionals, we know what we're doing, we got a plan, we have an agenda, we know what we're going to do in terms of where we're going to move your student and how to get them there. And most importantly, that we understand their kid and we understand the needs of their kid and the needs of their family. So I want everyone to just sort of keep that phone call in mind as we move through the product itself. So MindPrint is an online cognitive assessment. It is asynchronous, right? So students can do it on their own. It takes about an hour. They can do it online. They can do it at home. The older kids can do it on their own, no problem. The younger kids need someone to administer it, which basically means telling them to start and stop. We're normed by age for ages 8 through 21. But two key things to know is, one, it doesn't look like anything they've seen in school. There's no math, there's no reading comp, there's no multiple choice, there's no bubble sheets. It's not some some self-reported worksheet that we cooked up somewhere. It's actually it was developed at Penn Medicine with a grant from the National Institute of Health. And it lived for the first 5-6 years of its life in academia. Anyone doing large-scale cognitive assessment, this was the go-to battery. NASA used it in their famous twin study. They still use it today. We are on our second round of an NSF grant. And anyone doing, they built what they hoped would be the gold standard of scalable cognitive assessments. But they built it for themselves. They built it for the research community. And what we've done is gotten our hands on it and begun to adapt it for K-12. That's the other side of the business, is selling this into schools and school districts. And then what I've been working on and focused on is adapting it for use for tutoring companies. So what we measure are there are 9 tests in the battery across 4 primary cognitive domains. So we're looking at complex reasoning. How do you understand things? Memory, your ability to retain those things. Executive functions, let's call it your readiness to learn, and the efficiency with which you do all of the above. Now, the 10 cognitive skills that we are tracking they're the skills that are most strongly correlated to academic achievement. So whether we're talking about content mastery, skill mastery, practice for standardized tests, or behavioral things like, why is my student struggling in algebra? Why is it so hard to get him to focus and organize his homework? For all of these things, usually the goals are clear. Everyone agrees what the goals are, whether it's achievement or behavioral goal, but what's driving those behaviors may not be clear. But what I can tell you, because we have the data, is that at the end of the day, it's the cognitive skills that drive academic performance. And if you don't know what's driving the behavior, if you don't know what's holding the student back for whatever that goal is, it is very, very hard to bring the right solution. Lots of our tutors are doing this now, but oftentimes it's really a process of trial and error, of trying to figure out the kid and figure out and see what works. But all of these things that we've done for years based on hunch and intuition are now in fact knowable and measurable. And they're knowable and measurable on day one before the student even starts, which allows us to be more effective and more efficient. Okay, so let's say, just to give you a sense of how it works and how it could play out from a product standpoint, before we talk about marketing or other implementation, let's say the call comes in and the student's struggling with reading comp. It could be reading comp on a standardized test, or it could be reading comp in 4th grade. Again, the goal is clear. Parent knows why they're on the phone. They need to help their student with reading comp. But the reason that student is struggling could be a number of different things. With reading comp, usually it's one of these 3. So it could be a working memory problem, meaning by the time they get to the 3rd paragraph, they've forgotten the 1st paragraph, or by the time they get to the questions, they've already forgotten what was written in the passage. That would be a memory problem. Maybe the memory's fine, but it's a reasoning problem, right? So they have no trouble recollecting or recalling the information, but they're having trouble making it snap into focus and form a coherent picture. Maybe the memory's fine and the reasoning's fine, but it's a speed issue. It's processing. They can do it. They just need a little bit more time. Now, depending on what the problem is that we're addressing, we're going to bring radically different solutions to the table. So if it's a memory problem, and this is more or less in a test prep filter, but it's applicable to academic and K-12 as well. It's a memory problem. We're going to address this thing from a memory standpoint and trying to get that information to stick in their head, because that's what the kid needs and that's what the kid is struggling with. Let's say it's not a memory issue, but it's a reasoning issue. So now the memory's fine. I'm not going to bring memory strategies, but I'm going to try to get to the reasoning. Maybe if they're struggling with verbal reasoning, but they have stronger abstract, we can get at it through visualizing. We can get at it through passage selection. We can get it through question selection. Now, the strategies that you may use for memory could be great strategies, and probably are. In fact, I'm sure they are. But if it's not solving the student's problem, no matter how good that strategy is, ultimately you're going to lose that student, right? If someone, like when I do reading comp, I don't use memory strategies because I don't need them. And if someone tried to get me to slow down and underline and notate, I'm going to ignore them, because that doesn't help me, because that's when I struggle. That's not what I struggle with. So no matter how good the strategies are, no matter how good the training is, no matter how good the materials are, if you're not differentiating it based on the needs of the kid, ultimately you're going to lose that kid, because you're giving them strategies that isn't making their life easier and isn't showing results. So everything we do is about right strategy, right kid at the right time. How do we find out exactly what the student needs and bring the right strategies to bear so that we can begin to make a difference and begin to see results. And again, these things two kids might walk in with the exact same score, but totally different needs. And if we're not differentiating, then we might help one kid and end up not helping the other. So once the student's taken that 1-hour assessment, this is one of the first things that comes back. This is the basic MindPrint report. This report you may or may not choose to share with parents. You have complete control over who sees what and when. But what this does is takes the 10 things that we're measuring and puts them on what is in effect a bell curve. So the middle of the blue here, that is average, right? That's the mean, the median, and the mode. Most skills for most kids end up in this blue range. If it's at the high end of the expected range, then it's a strength. If it's at the low end, it's a little bit weaker, but anything in the blue is basically good. Kid is on track developmentally and can handle whatever they're seeing in school. Any of the skills that end up over here in the green, that's the top 16th percentile. If there's a star, that's the top 5th percentile. These are your gifted and talented kids, especially if it's the complex reasoning skills that end up over there. These are highly capable kids. They're at the high end of that range. Any skills that end up over here in the purple, that's the bottom 16th percentile. If there's a square over here, it's the bottom 5th percentile. these are your kids that are going to likely need accommodations, that are likely going to qualify for accommodations, right? If you have parents who come in and they're wondering, is there something more going on, but maybe they're not quite ready to commit to a full neuropsych, right? Which could be 4, 5, 6 grand. And that's even assuming that you can get on someone's schedule within the next 4 or 5 months. This is in 1 hour, we can tell them whether or not that's a necessary step, whether or not it's worth their time to go down that road or not. So that is from a data standpoint. Everything again is normed by age. We have an enormous data set. The test was normed originally with 10,000 students, 50,000 service members. That was 10 years ago. And we have added thousands of students in the interim. So we're going to know quite specifically where each skill set sits vis-a-vis that student's peers. And then everything gets a write-up. So let's talk about stronger skills. We want a strengths-based approach. Let's talk about helping them leverage the things that they are great at, skills that need support, and what kind of strategies can we bring to bear to support those students, and then what are the recommendations. So this first report is primarily descriptive in nature. Who is this student as a learner? What are the strengths and weaknesses? But the next thing we need to do at that point, though, is turn the corner to the prescriptive. So now that we know who the student is, let's talk about what we're going to do about it and how we're going to help this student be more successful given their unique set of strengths and weaknesses. And we all of us have a unique set of strengths and weaknesses. So this is the back page here is the student-facing version. In this one, we've stripped out all the comparative data. It's more strengths-based, and we're looking just at those skills on a relative basis. So the bigger domain here, that's the stronger domain. So for memory, it's a little bit covered up, but in this case, the student's strongest domain is long-term memory, and their verbal memory is a little bit stronger than their nonverbal memory. And then here are some strategies to use for a student with stronger verbal memory. Again, it's strength-based. On the second page, though, what we've done is begun to we have an enormous library of evidence-based strategies, all correlated to cognitive skill sets. So what we've done on the second page is go through all of these different academic areas, whether we're talking about organizing homework or reading challenging texts, and we've curated those strategies that we think are going to be important and that are going to be high impact for this particular student, right? And part of this is doing this work for you so that you don't have to spend the time pouring through the results and trying to analyze exactly what the student needs. You've got a game plan on day one that is correlated precisely to that student's needs. And you can put that in your tutor's hands so that now your tutor can be, honestly, can have, even a brand new tutor can have the same insights and the same level of sophistication that your most veteran tutors have. Once you click on any of those things, so let's say you're looking at memorizing for efficiency, the first strategy is spaced out studying. You can give your tutors or your students access to this. Once you click into that, you get these strategy cards. They are short, practical, and easy to implement, right? How do we take something that is descriptive and make it as immediately useful and practical as we possibly can? Because again, at the end of the day, how do we start changing what the students are doing for the greatest possible impact? We want to make lives easier and make their learning more effective. And so, all of our strategies are organized in order of best fit, right? Like you can't give a kid 50 strategies. That's akin to giving them none. Start with the ones that are going to be most impactful for that particular kid. And it differs for every kid, right? Different kids have different needs. Your tutors are figuring this out now, but they're usually figuring it out over time and using some process of trial and error. We want to make that smarter, more efficient, and far more precise, and certainly backed by actual data. Now, those reports that we just looked at started through a cognitive lens, So what are your complex reasoning skills? What are your memory skills? And then kind of backed into some subject areas. If you want, and if it's easier, you can start in an academic and a subject-based setting and stay there. So we partner with NWEA. They put out the MAP exam. They test hundreds of thousands of kids a year. And that gives us access to an enormous data set of academic achievement data organized around Common Core standards. With that data set and the series of mind prints, we can correlate those two things together, and we can begin to see by Common Core standard, where are students likely to be strong, areas to keep an eye on, and then specifically areas where we know they're going to need support. In many cases, before the school year has even started, we know that the student is likely to struggle in this particular standard. And then, of course, as always, here are the strategies that, these are all live links, here are the strategies that are going to be important for this particular student when they are working on reading proficiency, for example. So if you don't want to sort of go down the deeper rabbit hole of cognitive skills, we can start in academic terms and stay in academic terms. This certainly is great around parent-teacher conference time, right? So those like that first set of midterm grades come back, or midterm comments, and parents are ready to either go in for a parent-teacher conference and they need to know what questions to ask, or they come out of that parent-teacher conference thinking, oh my God, I need to step in and do something here. Let me call a tutor doctor and see if there's something I can help with. We can hone in very, very quickly. The other thing you can do is if they call you for one particular area, we can now expand the conversation to talk about other areas where we know that student's going to need help, and then even very quickly begin to bring the right strategies so that we can show them that we've got a plan. And then, of course, we can bring tutors and parents into the conversation and make them part of the solution, right? So let's say we have a student who has weaker flexible thinking. You can output all these strategies in a dozen different ways. You can take this sheet, you can output it instantaneously, you can hand it to the tutor and say, all right, these are the things, tutor, I need you to work on. These are the things that should be part of every session that you're doing when you're working with that student, regardless of subject. And or you can crib this, you can rewrite it and put it in an email to the parent. Here's what we noticed, here are the strategies, here are the things we're going to be working on for your student. And let me make it as easy and convenient for you to do that as I possibly can, so that you can get that off to a parent, you can do that efficiently, and frankly, makes you look great. This is what the map report. So if any of you have schools that are using map testing in your territory, I mean, look, they're going to get a report from, they're going to get a map report that's going to tell them whether their student is above grade level or behind grade level in particular areas. But unless they're using the joint MindPrint map exam, it's not going to tell them why. And that's what we're going to be able to do, right? So it's one thing to know, all right, he's a little bit behind grade level in math, but we can now say why, and then very quickly pivot to what to do about it. And then that becomes a tutoring plan, and that becomes a service that we can charge for. We've done the same thing for SAT and ACT. So our results are correlated to the map, they correlate to a Whisk and a Woodcock-Johnson, and they also correlate to SAT and ACT scores. So this is generated, this student may never have taken an ACT, may not have taken one yet, but as long as they've done that 1 hour MindPrint, everything drives off of that initial 1 hour at-home MindPrint assessment. We know that this particular kid is going to be somewhere between a 22 and a 32 on the ACT, with about a 15% chance of being between a 22 and a 36. It's expressed as a curve because it is a curve, so diminishing likelihood you're at either extreme. To the extent that we can do that for the composite score, we can also do it for subscores. Now, let's say the student does have a test score, either a PSAT or a pre-ACT, or they've taken a diagnostic test. You can put those actual scores in here. And I see, like most test prep tutors tend to spend the bulk of their time in math, just because there's more stuff to do in math land, right? There's more things to cover in math. But let's say that we have a pre-score and we can put it in there, and that student is already maxing out their math score. They're overperforming in math. You could spend all the hours you want in math, but you're not going to get a big movement in that score because there are a lot fewer points to get and they're going to be harder to come by. But let's say that student is underperforming in English. Now that's where the low-hanging fruit is. That's where you're going to get that return on time invested in the form of points. And that should therefore be the priority, right? So when we talk about seeing results, right, like quickly, sometimes you start with a kid and you work with them for a while and the score's not moving yet, and the parents start to get a little bit antsy and they start calling you up and saying, hey, what's going on here? First of all, let's see if we can get there faster. But second of all, like maybe it's a student who's got weaker flexible thinking, and we know from the get-go that it's going to take them a little bit longer to change the way they approach the test. That's another one of those things that is now knowable and measurable before you've even met the student. To the extent that we can do this for an SAT and for an ACT score, we can put those two things together, and using the published concordance tables, we can now say the degree to which a student has a stronger cognitive affinity for one test over the other, and by how much, right? So right now, most folks who are doing this are giving people a full-length SAT and a full-length ACT, which takes a lot of time and doesn't necessarily answer the question. Again, we can do this now based on that same 1 hour assessment. Some kids are going to be fine one way or the other, but for some kids, there is a pronounced lean. That is now knowable, and we can even tell you exactly where that lean came from and by how much. This is certainly great for anyone who comes in asking about SAT versus ACT. It's also a phenomenal lead gen tool, right? You can go out to your market and say, I can answer this question for you, and I can do it scientifically with data. I can quantify it in a way that nobody else can, and I can do it in under an hour. And honestly, no one else can do that. I mean, some folks have kind of, I call it a Franken diag, where they cut a little bit of SAT off and stick it on, and a little bit of ACT and stick it on. But that's that is not a statistically sound practice, shall we say. Okay, so that's on the test prep side of things. So let's talk about now just sort of leveraging it for the purpose of the business. There are, look, we all know it's a crowded marketplace. There are plenty of tutors out there, both independents as well as other tutoring brands and tutoring companies. And you could call every single one of them, and they're all going to tell you, we've got great tutors. We've got great materials. We've got a great process. We love what we do. And I tend to think that for the most part, it's true for most of them. To the extent that your families are shopping around, or to the extent that you're in a crowded marketplace, being able to go to market with something that is new, that is objective, that is based on science and based on actual data, it's a whole different conversation. And it's something that they can experience from day one. Whether it's pre-sale and you're using it for lead gen purposes, we're going to tell your student who they are as a learner. We're going to tell you what areas you need to focus on, and we're going to put a great strategy packet for you, whether you sign up for us or not. There's an enormous value in that. Although what I can tell you is that by the time they get on the phone with you and walk through the kinds of feedback that you can give them about their kid, frankly, a far more insightful view than they even got from their parent-teacher conference, they're going to convert, right? Because they're going to have experienced a level of insight and sophistication that they simply can't get anywhere else. Then we do onboarding, right? So now it's not that you're going to go out and tell them, oh, you've got a better tool or better process. They're going to see it, and they're going to feel it, and they're going to have done it, and have an experience with you guys that is unique, that they haven't had anywhere else. And then you're going to use that to make sure that your tutors know what they're doing, to make sure that you're collecting real and actionable data about their student. And you're going to use that to create a smarter and more informed tutoring plan. Right. And then you're going to hand that over to the tutors, and you're going to end up with smarter and more informed tutors. And all of this, by the way, is cumulative. Your tutors are going to begin to, after they've seen a bunch of kids, they're going to start, it's going to leak into their language, and you're going to start hearing them talk about cognitive skills and how students learn and strategies in a way that is smart and informed and sophisticated, and doesn't include them, making stuff up and doing, like, I know they're great and they're smart and they're doing what makes sense. But let's make sure that they know who the student is, and they're doing things that are really going to make a difference. Then, of course, you got the kids who come in who may have an undiagnosed learning difference, right? And we've all had those. And you get 2 or 3 months into the program and you're thinking, boy, if I had known this from the beginning, it would have been a very different conversation, or maybe it's not undiagnosed, but the parents didn't necessarily let you know. Again, like, that would have been a very different conversation had you known that on day one. The other thing that I see a lot of is, it's, especially in the academic support, it can often devolve into homework help. And to the extent that a high school kid down the street or a college kid down the street can do homework help for 20 or 25 bucks an hour, it is very hard to get a premium rate for widely available homework help. But the minute we start talking about who that student is as a learner, and we start evaluating exactly what that student needs cognitively, now we're talking about doing what a learning specialist does. And that absolutely is a premium service. And that is different enough and important enough that it is not something that the college kid down the street can do. And it absolutely is something that can and should command a higher fee, because it's a much more, a rarer and more sophisticated service that you are giving. Again, this starts to leak into tutor language very quickly. Your veterans are doing a lot of this already because they've learned this the hard way through intuition, hard-earned intuition, but intuition nonetheless. But your newbies, hopefully are following the script, because they don't yet have the experience to differentiate based on the needs of the kid. And no matter how good that script is if it's the same script for each kid, it is not optimized for the needs of each student. And so now we can go beyond content in tutor training and start actually talking about the science of learning, and then put the information in their hands that they need to actually take action on it, to operationalize it. And what you'll see is, once they start using it, I found this as a tutor myself. It was only like 2 or 3 kids before I started going, I wonder what MindPrint would tell me about this kid. And then all of a sudden, you've got the information you need, you've got the strategies you need, ready to move forward. And to try to do that without this tool, frankly, you couldn't. And so, as always, it's important to make it far easier and more convenient for them to do their jobs and be great at their job when they're working through you, than it would be for them to go and try to do this on their own. So we've created a tutor dependency there, which which helps them feel good about their job, but also keeps them engaged and reliant on your service. And so ultimately, we're going where your competition isn't and cannot. How do we bring something to market that they can't match and that they can't touch? And so back to that original phone call, back to the experience of that parent when they call and they say, okay, I need help. And back to your ability, no matter who's picking up that phone, to have a plan, to know exactly what that student needs quickly and efficiently, and design the right program for that student, and convince that parent that you know who their kid is and what their kid needs. That is a sale. And not only that, that is the beginning of a relationship where they're begin to trust you, but also, of course, tell their friends, because they're going to have had an experience with you that frankly they can't and wouldn't have had anywhere else. So that brings me to this is my last slide, then I'll throw it out for questioning. The way we do pricing. So we are not set up for, nor are we trying to be, nor do we want to be a retail service and product. You could come on the site as a parent and purchase a MindPrint. There's no services that come with that. It's not something we're out promoting, but if you did that on the site, it's $199 for the MindPrint. That is our publicly facing price. With our partners, we sell credits. You'll have an account. I'll show you what the account looks like. And you can buy credits. You can buy it one at a time as needed by kid. One credit is $69. You can buy them 10 at a time, it's $59, 20 at a time, it's $49, 100 at a time, it's $39. This is not publicly facing pricing. So as far as your clients know, they are getting this $200 value as part of their, you know, whether you're offsetting that with an onboarding fee or you're using that as a lead gen, and then you eat the cost if they convert, but charge them if they don't convert, like wherever it fits into your model. We have some folks actually who are even using this as a standalone revenue stream. So they're out there, student takes a MindPrint and then gets on the phone and does a 45-minute consultation with someone who's become an expert at reading this info, and they give the parents an enormous amount of value. And that just by itself is a $300 or $400 product, and enormously valuable for families. I think I'll turn this back over to Simeon, but for you guys collectively, we're going to put together a deal and offer to give you access to our lowest possible volume pricing, because we would absolutely love to work with Tutor Doctor on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, Neil, and team. So, you know, what we are disclosing are, you know, we've been working on what, you know, certainly what makes sense and, you know, what's going to be of value to the team, because, you know, we certainly don't want to assume that everybody can buy, you know, 100 of these assessments at one time. So Neil and I are going to come, you know, we've pretty much gotten it nailed down to what it could look like. One for IATDF members and those that are not a part of the association. That's going to be one piece that certainly folds into this. So, you know, I would certainly be on the lookout for this within the next couple of days so that you can actually see what the pricing looks like. And certainly I've been in communication with James Dolan, with the board president, around this equally as well. So I would not necessarily get hung up on the pricing. And certainly to Neil's point, please do not, you know, take a snapshot of this and go, hey, I can get this thing, every single assessment for $39, because it will vary depending on exactly where each person lands. So let me turn it back over to Neil. Do we still have time to jump into the website, Neil?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that I respond to any questions, but let me show you real quickly what, let me get out of PowerPoint land here. And pull up an actual account. I can show you what it looks like. One moment, please. Let me share a screen here. So here we are in a MindPrint account. Here's where all your students will show up, and this is what you'll see once they've done. Here's a student who started a MindPrint, but it's in review. It takes us 24 to 48 hours to turn the results around. Every assessment gets seen by a human. Once they've done it, here are all the different reports that you can generate for each individual student. And then you can click through. Here's the toolbox. All of these things are, takes a second when I'm on Zoom. All of these things are live links. So this particular student, his strongest domain was complex reasoning. Within complex reasoning, his spatial reasoning was his strongest skill. And here's a great strategy for a student with stronger spatial reasoning. A lot of stuff we put in the form of checklists. because we want to try to turn things into habits. And then, as I was showing you before, here are your curated strategies based on the need of that individual student. Every student will get a personalized learning plan. And again, you're going to have the ability to determine who sees what when. So you can ensure that parents can go in and see the toolbox. You can make sure the kid sees the toolbox. Kids will not see their own report or their own results. Parent won't see the results unless you allow them to see the results. Once you're in the toolkit, here's where we've started to match strategies to academic areas. So study skills, reading, writing, math, group work and participation, self-awareness and mindset. All of these things, again, optimized by best fit for the individual student. These things can be added, they can be deleted, they can be filtered. And you can even go generic and say, all right, I've got a student with, let's say, weaker attention. So show me all of the attention strategies. And here are all the attention strategies. And then here's this one. I began to show you this in the slide deck. Here is the one-sheeter that you can generate, again, quickly, easily, efficiently, how adults can support attention. Print this off, hand this to your tutors, and or print it off, hand it to your parents, or simply take the info and translate it into an action plan that you can send to the parents and say, all right, here are things we know, here are things we want to work on for your particular student. It's how do I capture the insights that great tutors and great diagnosticians have already? And then how do I make that available to everyone quickly and efficiently, no matter who they are? And then how do I attach that to practical, actionable strategies that the kids are actually going to need, that they're actually going to use? And that's it. I mean, that's the whole that's the whole tool and the whole process. And the end result, hopefully, is a student who knows who they are as a learner, and has the self-efficacy skills to go get the things they need in order to be successful. Especially as they transition into middle school or into high school or into college, or beyond, for that matter. So let me stop talking for a second and throw it open. Questions,
Yep.
thoughts, comments, concerns. What do we got?
Neil, first and foremost, thanks again. Thanks so much for doing this for us. And thanks to everyone for jumping on board. I'm going to try to keep my story. Sorry, I guess I don't have my video on, do I? I'm going to try to share my story as briefly as I can, Neil. And then what I'll do is I'll kind of go through some of the questions that we actually have in the chat.
I didn't see the chat, but I see that chat.
Yeah. If you feel free to jump in and respond to folks as you see them. So Neil and I, like I said, we've been working for a little over a year now. One of the questions that was asked is kind of how, using this with a combination of be it something like Let's Go Learn or using this, how do you actually, be it pricing or anything along those lines. One of the ways that I actually accommodate this for in terms of my pricing is through the enrollment. And Neil kind of talked about that. So through the enrollment and or registration, that's actually how I fit that. That's actually how I fit that into my pricing. There are other certainly use cases where if you want to use this as a lead, as strictly just as a lead gen, by all means, there's absolutely nothing stopping you from doing that. And certainly that is something that, we can, one, with the assistance of MindPrint and certainly with whatever marketing strategies you have, we can certainly help you do that, if you will. And I know there were questions around, marketing, videos, et cetera, et cetera. Again, there are a variety of tools along those lines. I choose to only allow this. I choose to only provide the assessment only to individuals who become my clients. That is one of my differentiators. So I'm not doing this. As a matter of fact, I think there's a tutoring company here in the Baltimore area that also utilizes MindPrint. They use it as a lead gen, but nevertheless, they don't necessarily win those clients. What I'm actually doing is, this is a way for me to better personalize and individualize your tutoring. Not that I'm just going to do some assessment and tell you about your kid and you happily go on your way. Again, that's my choice and that is my particular strategy. Once a student actually completes a MindPrint, as Neil said, I've actually found it to be a little bit shy of 24 hours, in terms of getting a report. That highlight where you can kind of see all of the strategies. I look at what are the highest levels, which one has kind of the 5 cellular bar signals. I click on maybe 2 or 3 of those and I email to the client as well as to the tutor and I say, here you go. Because what I'm not interested in is I'm not interested in my tutors trying to go in and try to figure it out on their own. So to the best of my ability to help them and to kind of give them a leg up, I do that for them. The amount of time that takes me to actually do, maybe about 2-3 minutes max. I do not have an admin. What you see right here, this is it. So I know for many of us, we wear all of the hats. We don't have the admin. We don't have the payroll person. We don't have the this. For me, it only takes maybe 2 or 3 minutes to do. Certainly, if you've got an admin, you can turn it over to an admin and allow them to kind of handle that and allow them to kind of leverage it. I utilize this alongside of LGL. And for those of us, I think Neil knows this, that's our Let's Go Learn assessment. Let's Go Learn is more about content. As was kind of mentioned about this is not a content-based assessment. It is a cognitive assessment. We want to, through MindPrint, we want to understand the why. With Let's Go Learn, I want to understand the what. So when you don't, I want to know that you don't get polynomials, that you don't get rational expressions. Yes, I'm a high school math teacher. Sorry, I can't do anything for reading. I want to know those things about you in math, but at the same time, what I also want to know is, why are you not grasping polynomials? I could sit there all day and try to do problem after problem after problem with you, but certainly if I'm not utilizing the right strategy, it certainly doesn't help. My tutors have found this very beneficial because again, for them, it takes the guesswork. They don't have to go through 3, 4, 5 months of tutoring. And as a result, for my business model, because I use more of a subscription-based model, my clients stick with me. They're staying with me because they're actually seeing not just the return on investment in terms of what their child is doing academically, but also the behaviors and things that they're actually able to pass on through other classes. Because they know that their child, struggles with attention or struggles with flexible thinking or whatever it is, they're actually able to leverage that for the other classes that they take. Even though I'm helping you with just mathematics, you can certainly leverage the same thing and say, hey, what is it that I need to be doing differently when it comes to reading, language arts, et cetera, et cetera. One of the big questions that was asked, Chris, statistically, how many students, how many data points were actually used to determine the 15% likelihood of the ACT score stretch goal? And how many students was that determined from? I found that to be an interesting question because I've never had a parent ask me to, but it's obvious that we've got some parents out there who are interested in the data. So can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, everything's been normed with an enormous data set. But what I think a lot of you might be looking at is seeing that range, and that range is pretty broad. I like to think of it not so much as broad as accurate, because that range represents all kids in our data set who have both a MindPrint and an actual SAT or an actual ACT on file. That includes kids who took the test once, kids who took it 3 times, kids who were tutored, kids who weren't tutored, kids who had accommodations, kids who didn't have accommodations. That's the full range of possible outcomes. It's our job as tutors to get them to the highest possible end of that range, wherever that range maxes out. So for competitive kids with high quality tutoring, I would expect a reasonable expectation is to get them all into that stretch range. And I would, furthermore, I'd argue that the consistency with which a tutor is able to do that is probably the best measurement of the effectiveness of that tutor. right? They only get them to the high end of their into the stretch range half the time. That's a very different scenario than a tutor who can get them into that stretch range 80% of the time. Obviously kids call us the week before the exam. Kids do a lot of hours or a few hours, so there are other variables there. But specifically in answer to your question, with literally hundreds of kids in the SAT and ACT data sets alone. And then, honestly, our standard deviation matches that of the SAT and the ACT precisely. Our medians match that of both scores precisely, which is to say, if you on MindPrint have a verbal reasoning that is above average, your ACT score will be above average. If your verbal reasoning as measured by MindPrint efficiency is below average, your ACT score is below average. I mean, it is, I find it a little stunning and sometimes a little eerie, actually, how well and consistently it correlates, but there's a range there. It's our job to get the kids to the highest end of that range as we possibly can, given the time we have allotted.
Awesome.
I hope that answers the question. Is that?
I hope it does. Follow-up question or another question. And I'll answer this question, and then certainly Neil, you can jump in if you want to add anything to it. So regarding the pricing that was shown, is the price paid by the lead client with no additional price paid by the Z? The price that is presented is very much no different than Let's Go Learn. We purchase the Let's Go Learn assessments, and then we administer those assessments to the client. So the price is paid by the franchisee or the business owner in this case. Then we administer that assessment to the client. Now, if your registration fee is $100 and you wanted to cover that, or if you say, no, my registration fee is $100 plus there's a $50 or $60 assessment on your MindPrint, the cost to the franchisee is the cost to the franchisee. How you decide to pass that cost on, and if you choose whether or not to pass that on to the client, is completely up to you as the business owner. Anything more, Neil?
My assumption in terms of how to structure this is that nobody wants to add another expense to their basket of goods if they don't have to. Right. And if it's not making a difference for them, or, if you're calling it a marketing expense, how can I make it as convenient and flexible and cheap for you as I possibly can? And the best way for me to do that is to assume that collectively you're going to buy a lot, assume that risk on my own, and give you the flexibility of getting the benefit of a volume purchase, but the flexibility of purchasing in whatever quantities are right for your particular business. That's kind of the operational framework I'm going into.
Exactly.
And then we'll see how to make that work out.
And for those of you who are part of the Independent Association to the Doctor Franchisees, and even for those that are not, that's been one of the things that we have been very, very big on. James may want to add more to this than what I'm going to share. When we come together and work together, there's amazing things that we can do. I think, it's kind of, I kind of almost look at it like, you have a choice. You can go to a regular grocery store and buy something individually, or you can go to Costco or, a warehouse. You can buy a whole bunch of them and get them at a cheaper cost. If there's 20 of us on here, and then there's 20 of us that commit that we're going to buy X number of MindPrint assessments, then guess what? When we're doing that collectively, that's better than any one of us individually, doing this directly with MindPrint, and all of a sudden we're paying $59, $60 an assessment. So think about that. So just kind of keep that in mind. Again, how this is going to look and how this is going to be structured from a purchase perspective. I don't want you guys to get hung up on that. Just allow a day or two to kind of pass by for additional details. Marketing materials, Neil. When folks come on board and, hey, I want to market this to guidance counselors or what have you, again, you and I have talked about this, that there's strategies when working with schools. We don't want to just go and just wave a flag and go, hey, guidance counselor, here's something I have. So one, there are certain things that we can partner with each individual business owner on, how to best approach schools. We're not just walking up to the PTA and setting up a table. No, there's a strategy when trying to work from a strategic partner standpoint. Are there any marketing tools or marketing collateral that we'll be able to equip business owners with to effectively speak with the principal at their school. Because ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, that's really who you're going to want to get to, because those are the individuals that hold the funds, not necessarily the guidance counselors. And there are ways that principals can leverage title dollars to actually pay for the assessment should they choose to do so. And there's been some huge work that MindPrint has already done, one in MindPrinting an entire school, MindPrinting an entire district. There's lots of white papers on this stuff already. So Neil, you want to kind of talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. A couple things there. One, just in response to the quick question from Chris. Yes, we're constantly adding to the database. We've actually just hired a data scientist away from ACT. She was a data scientist over there. And the first thing, she's going to become our in-house data scientist to publish on our results. And the first thing she's doing is reviewing all of our ACT data. From a marketing standpoint, look at my basic assumption is that the burden of describing what is MindPrint and what does it do should fall on us, not on you guys. So anything I can do to help with that, anything I can do to help you get it out into your market is good for both of us. So we've got plenty of marketing collateral that I'm happy to co-brand it. I can put your logo on it. I can give you our logo to put on your things. I can workshop language to put on your websites or any kind of outreach collateral. Yeah, I mean, it's nothing but to all of our benefit to get that right. I certainly spent a lot more time talking about MindPrint than anyone here. And so I'm happy to put that in your hands and in your service. Awesome. We are and should be a partner in that. The other thing I want to say, Simeon, real quickly, back to the question around pricing, is what I'd love to do at this stage is get this out in your ecosystem and get your hands on it. Mm-hmm. So if we could say, all right, let's everyone commit to trying this with 5 kids, and we'll put our best, deepest bulk rate discount on that. Try it with 5 kids, and then let's gather back in and look at those profiles, talk through it, see what kinds of things you can extract from it, so that you guys actually see if it's real, see if it's yielding info that is actionable, see if it's something that you might actually use in your tutoring, and then let's all learn from each other as you kind of kick the tires and ask questions and see what's working. If we could do that over the next couple of weeks, yep, we're all going to get smarter, and we're going to all see how this plays out and thrives in Tutor Doctor land. I'd love to try to create some kind of a next step like that with this group, yep, if I could.
You got it. Hey, another question, because I certainly don't want to bypass any questions. I've never done this one, so you might have a direct answer better than I, only because I choose to be careful about what reports I show to parents. What is the aggregate total number of report pages? Yeah.
So if you were to take the basic MindPrint report that I showed you and print it, that report is if you just hit print, it's 11 pages long. Now, but what I will tell you is that the first page is student specific. The second page is all the comments that are student specific. And then the next 9 pages are, we've mail merged the names in there. But it's really more describing, well, what do you mean by executive functions? What do you mean by complex reasoning? And how does it play out for a student? So for that particular report, you only need the first and second page. The student learner profile is 2 pages. There is a third page, but it's defining terms. So it's generic to everybody. The test prep reports are 2 pages that are specific, and the third page is defining terms. I don't know what that brings me to as far as a total, but I want to draw a distinction between stuff that is specific to the student and then a lot of the explanatory stuff that goes around it, so that people can make sense of it and get explanations embedded in the report.
Okay.
And by the way, and then it's all completely full of live links. that take you into the website, that take you into the learning library, where there are more pages.
Awesome. I certainly want to make sure that I respect everyone's time. There's another one, if you will. Actually, kind of not quite, Byron. We'll talk about that. It is actually one assessment, but from that one assessment, we can derive different reports based off that one assessment. So we don't need to. So for example, in the MindPrint assessment, we're actually able to run, an SAT, ACT analysis. We don't need the student to take a MindPrint again to get an SAT or ACT analysis. We don't need them to do an NWEA. We don't need them to do any of that. So it's really one assessment, but we're able to derive different reports. Question from Mark. And it's an interesting question, simply because, Neil, as I've shared with you before, every business owner on here, we operate our businesses differently. Everybody. There's some common things that we all have in common, but how we function independently is kind of what we do. There is no, it's not like going to Chick-fil-A and everybody's using the same type of cash register. That's not the way we operate. So many of us have independent contractors as our tutors. Some of us have employees. In my particular model, Mark, I have independent contractors. So from a training and development standpoint, one, to make sure that I don't cross that gray line or that fine line, I do not provide any type of training to them. What I do is I provide the toolkit and I provide the toolbox. What I will do with the tool, what I do with the tutor is I let them know the MindPrint is complete. I am now ready to review it with the parent. I invite the tutor to come into that conversation with me. That is certainly their choice. And that's kind of away from my own hidden way of kind of training them on what MindPrint is. But I don't necessarily set up something where I am going to do the training. That doesn't necessarily mean that it cannot be done. It doesn't mean that I certainly could not leverage, MindPrint to provide some type of training. Again, there's ways in which it can be done, but the more dialed in question, Neil, is if you take an individual, regardless of whether they are independent contractor or tutor, how much time does one need to invest in understanding this? And before you answer that question, I will tell you guys this. Again, me leveraging independent contractors, my folks have just run with it. I have not trained them. They have run with it. They understand it. They jump right in. For them, it is a no-brainer. There's nothing I need to sit down and train them on. And again, that's only because I am speaking more, and forgive me, I'm speaking more from an educator perspective. Teachers want to teach, educators want to educate, tutors want to tutor. So to the degree that I can take as much of that overload off of their hands. So if all I need to send to you is that high level profile, these are the things that we need to work on. At the end of the day, that's really all the tutor really cares about. I don't have them going to the website to manipulate. Again, the toolbox is there just in case they want to jump in and see if there are additional strategies that they may have not touched. But I have not provided any type of formal training to my tutors, and they've just run with it.
The call that I was on just before this one was my weekly open office hours, where tutors come in and they bring profiles, and we all get in and I scratch out the names and we just workshop them together, and everyone learns from each other, and we talk through who the kid is and what the kid needs. If we wanted to create a forum like that for tutor doctor collectively, let's do it.
Yeah.
What I find is that tutors know a lot of this stuff already because they've been working with kids for a while. They've been observing these things. All we're doing is in many ways just giving them names for stuff that they've already seen happen. And so I've often been pleasantly surprised by how quickly, within, they're a little nervous the first time, but you talk through a couple profiles, and by the third, fourth profile, they're starting to run with it. But that said, by all means, let's do training collectively. We certainly have plenty of async models. We've got all videos for all this stuff. They can run with it. The strategies are self-explanatory. I think training's a good thing, and we want them to use it. But to the extent that we can do that collectively, to the extent that we can do that through an async module. And then it also depends on what the use case is. Maybe it's not training the tutors, but it's training whoever's doing the onboarding.
Yes.
That's someone who's touching every client as they come in.
Yes.
And we want those people up to speed because they're talking to parents and they're fielding questions. And then the tutors just get strategies and they're fine, they can run with it. So there's a fair amount of flexibility there in terms of how much or how little we do. And so the short answer really is, let's do what's going to be efficient and effective for your business. You know, I don't want to put a high, any kind of hurdle in front of you in terms of getting this up to speed. So get everyone comfortable and then get them going.
Gotcha. Let's see. So I think it looks like a lot of folks have to go, and I think I know we've got like different things, boot camps and a whole bunch of different things going on. This session is actually recorded. What I'm going to ask you guys to do is I'll provide my email address here. So by all means, please, as a matter of fact, you can send me any additional questions and I'll get those over to Neil. I think one of the next steps that we're going to talk about that Neil and I are going to capture on, one, setting up accounts for you guys potentially where you can have maybe one to take the assessment on your own, maybe a credit to use with maybe one student or what have you, and then look at, you know, again, what we can do in terms of best foot forward to get everybody maybe 5 to 10 accounts that we can kind of run with over the next month. Get your hands wet, get your hands dirty and with it, and then we come back together. Fair enough? Awesome. You guys be blessed. You've been an amazing audience. Hey, do me one quick favor. Please go into the Z only chat page and share something that you've learned about this. Get other folks excited. We've got to start. This is a sidebar on MindPrint. This has nothing to do with MindPrint. We have got to start working together and stop working in isolation. We can clearly see it now. Yes, we are part of a franchise. Our franchisor is not going to do everything for us. If we have the power and the capacity to come together as one unit and make changes and create our own USPs for that matter. How many times we're going to ask that? We don't need to ask that anymore. Let's create our own and let's go out and run with it and change the trajectory of student lives the cognitive way without putting a whole lot of thought into it. You guys be blessed. You are amazing. I'll see you later.
Thank you, everybody.